do you have any opinion on sort of where the Chinese economy is headed right now? Evergrande sort of put some of their economic woes right in everyone's faces. And I think a lot of people were a little bit blind to that before the Evergrandes.
Yeah, there are a lot of potholes in the road, to China dominating the world. But the U.S. economy experienced similar growing pains along the way. So I think that overall, the Chinese economy is positioned to be the dominant global economic power. China has dominated the world for a lot longer than the U.S. has. I mean, you go back throughout history and you look at various periods of time where China was, the strongest, largest economy in the world. I mean, so America's position, 100 years where that's been the case. So, I mean, China's had that position for many, many centuries. Maybe, I don't know the exact number of times. I mean, how many centuries, but many. And so China dominating the world is more the norm, and so I think they're obviously going to be back on top. I think the majority of this century, which is really young, right? We're in the second decade of the century. And long before we get to the middle, I mean, I think even by the end of this decade, it's very likely that China will be a larger economy than the U.S.
Wow, that's interesting. I want to go back to one point, Peter, about the financial market here in the U.S. And because I'm a little bit perplexed as to which direction this might go. And this one has to do with the stock market, okay? There are those who are saying, should we be expecting another crash like the one in the 1930s? On the other hand, there are those who are saying, no, you don't have to worry about that because stock market is performing well despite whatever the economy of the U.S. Which one is which?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we're going to have another crash like the 30s, but that doesn't mean you don't have to worry. Because during the 1930s, we were on the gold standard.
Okay.
We don't have that benefit anymore.
Yeah. We do not.
And so the market can still crash as much as it did in the 30s if you measure it in the price of gold. So I think in terms of gold, and gold's around 1,800 an ounce right now, and the Dow's around 36,000. But if the Dow crashes to the point where it's worth 1 ounce of gold, which is what happened during the 1930s. You got, by about 1932, the Dow and gold were about the same price. That could happen again. And maybe it happens with, the Dow at 50,000 and gold at 50,000. But if the Dow and gold are the same price again, the Dow crashed. I don't care, what the nominal price is. Because, see, this time around, it's the dollar that's going to crash, right? So if you're simply measuring the value of stocks with dollars, if the dollar itself loses a lot of value, then, it may look like the stock market's gone up. It's like if you're 6 feet tall and I give you a ruler that only has 6 inches in it, and now you measure yourself, it doesn't mean you're 12 feet tall. You got to look at that ruler. I've cut the ruler in half. Your height hasn't changed. It's the ruler that's changed. And so now you're taller because a foot now has 6 inches, right? So if the dollar loses a lot of value and then you go and try to price stocks, well, obviously the price is going to go up when you're measuring stocks with money that's worth less. Gold is an objective measure of value. That ounce of gold doesn't change. The government doesn't print any gold. So if you really want to know what's happening to prices, you need something like gold as an arbiter. So you can look at it through a lens that doesn't change. And if you do that, you will see a crash in all of these overpriced assets. And, and the way Americans will see that crash, right? Your stock market portfolio maybe it doesn't go down, or maybe it goes up, maybe it doubles. But when you go to the supermarket, everything is 10 times as expensive. Right? Your electric bill is 10 times as expensive. So if your stock portfolio has doubled, but your cost of living has gone up 10 times, your stock portfolio has actually lost value.
Yeah.
Because its ability to help, offset your cost of living has been diminished. The real value of those stocks has gone down relative to all of the goods that you want to buy. Because when people invest in the stock market, nobody buys stocks because they want stocks. They don't hang the certificate, on a wall and admire it. People are buying stocks because they hope they can sell them at a profit or take the dividends and then go out and buy stuff.
Right.
It's the stuff that they want. Stocks are just a means to get you more stuff, right? So, but if the price of the stuff you want is skyrocketing compared to the value of the stocks you own, you're getting poorer, not richer.
Wow. That's very interesting explanation, because now it makes sense to me, Peter, why Russia has moved 2 planes full of gold from Venezuela. Why a full plane from Switzerland flew to China with gold. And
some of these countries now don't trust having their gold stored by third parties. They want it themselves.
That makes sense, Peter. That makes sense, because I didn't put the 2 and 2 together at the time when I came across that info. Only to find out last week that Russia is working on dumping the US dollar.
Yes.
They are moving into that direction. So could it be?
Yeah, I mean, I tell all my clients, you don't want to be the last one on your block to sell your dollars. You got to get out early.
Wow. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that at the time when I came across that info, because I had some of my contacts that I talked to in Europe, and I was like, it just didn't dawn on me at the time, Peter. So your explanation makes perfect sense to me now as to why that is.
So go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So because we have a really global audience, one of the things that we're interested in, and I would love your opinion on this, Peter, is, the US is going through a lot of these financial woes, let's call them, but that affects the entire global economy. So how do you see it impacting the Chinese economy, the Russian economy, and sort of the global economy as a whole, as all of this shifts around? Because we are seeing countries like Russia, for example, trying to get away from the US dollar. So how does that impact everyone else? And how do you see that maybe reshuffling? And does the US dollar lose reserve currency status? What do you see happening there?
Well, it's totally going to upend the current economic system, where Americans, really sit in an envious position. We are the major beneficiaries of the dollar's status, because it enables us to live beyond our means. We can import all these goods without having to produce them. And it's expensive to produce goods. It takes real resources, and creates pollution, right? So we get the benefit of all these factories without actually having to deal with them. They're in some other country. And because we have the reserve currency, we can borrow a lot of money, but we don't have to save much money. And the borrowing, and spending, that's the fun part. The saving and producing is the hard part, right? So we just get to do all the fun stuff. And the world is doing all our heavy lifting. So, when the dollar crashes, and it will crash, then our whole standard of living is going to implode with it. But as bad as that's going to be for America, it's actually going to be a relief for the rest of the world, because the rest of the world will no longer have to bear the burden of supporting the U.S. economy. So the rest of the world will have more stuff to consume, and they'll have more of their savings to invest productively in their own economies. They won't be lending as much to us. So they're going to reclaim their savings. They're going to reclaim the consumer goods that they produce. So the rest of the world is going to get to have more, and America is going to have to make do with a lot less.